All right, we're back here for the first time in a little while. I think since the last time we talked about whatever the last show is, Hawkeye, about a month and a half ago. We're back here today talking about Shang-Chi as we catch up on the Marvel movies before we get into Book of Boba Fett and Peacemaker, and then eventually Moon Knight premiering in late March on Disney+, which is going to be great. Trailer just dropped for that the other day. But again, kind of going back a bit to Shang-Chi, I know we spoke, all three of us, about this soon after we all saw it together with Tom Clark. Check out his show, 6M Podcast. I know we all talked about it with him a couple of months ago. Kind of wanted to revisit it and talk about the movie, a couple of months after the fact, just because it's been about 4 or 5 months since it came out. It's now on Disney+. Everyone can watch it. I know we reviewed it almost immediately after we saw it, so it could be a case of where it was as good as we remember it, not being as good. I know I haven't seen it in a little bit. Neither of you, Chris. I know, Phil, you just rewatched it, so you can attest to that more than we can. But we'll get into all of that in a moment. Chris, you're back here for the first time in a while alongside all of us. BR_Doctor on the Twitter machine. Chris, what's going on, my man?
Oh, not too much. It's been a couple months since I've seen this one, but I think I remember most of it.
Yeah, it was a memorable enough movie. If it wasn't, I think if we were doing this, I would say for like Black Widow, I would probably have to go back and watch it, which I did enjoy. And you and I, Chris, I know we talked about that obviously a couple of weeks after it came out. This, I would say, was probably Eternals. I'm guaranteeing you right now, I saw that 2 months after Shang-Chi, after we saw that one together. That one I'm going to absolutely have to go back and watch because I don't remember most of that movie, and that's also on Disney Plus now. But that's a little bit different. But this was a good one. Phil, you actually did rewatch the movie just recently. Want to get your thoughts on it as well. You're on the Twitter machine at PhilDL616. What's going on, Phil?
I'm good. Still kind of sort of recovering from the booster, but I'm good.
That's good. So, that's awesome that way. Let's get right into it from there. I think we're all recovering from it. And this is the perfect movie to be watching coming out of the booster as well. You just said you got it a couple of days ago, watched Shang-Chi this morning. I'll start with you, Phil, since you just did rewatch it. Talk a little bit about, rewatching the movie now, if it holds up 4 months later, because it's been a little while since it came out.
I think it holds up really well. I think Marvel has managed to do this really cool thing I've noticed, at least since Black Panther, where they'll come in and have people interested in their lead, and then they do a great job of building the supporting cast around them really well. Like, the second time watching it, I was surprised how much I enjoyed Shang-Chi's family. Like, I think his sister is great in it. I think Wenwu is one of the best characters in the movie. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was great, especially for an origin story as well. There's not a lot of people, like myself included, that aren't familiar with the comics that go see the movies. And I wasn't sure what to expect going into it. Again, we talked about this a couple of months ago with Tom. But seeing the trailers, I got excited for it, and I was very interested to see what they would do with it, and ultimately it delivered. Chris, talk a little bit about watching it for the first time and how it delivered on your expectations, or if not, if it didn't. But talk about your initial impressions of the movie upon seeing it.
Well, I'm a big fan of kung fu movies. I think I have like close to or over 200 of them on DVD.
Mm-hmm.
And this felt like a love letter to all those movies, especially with including Michelle Yeoh and Tony Leung. Like, both of them have been in some classics, and they really went out of their way to make this feel both like a Marvel movie and like one of those Hong Kong kung fu movies. So I thought they did a really good job of mixing those two genres together. But, my only complaint, really, if there is one to be had, is that it did just sort of follow the same origin story formula that we've seen before. And I know that that's because so many characters in the comics have similar origin stories, because they were churning those things out like 5 a week, It's they had their patterns. So I was hoping they were going to do something a little surprising, and I can't really say that anything in the movie like shocked me, but it was a very good movie considering it was working within those constraints.
It's interesting you bring that up, because kind of thinking back on it now, I feel like it's been a while since we've had. I thought this was probably the best solo origin movie that we've gotten. But then again, the competition isn't really there. I know we had Eternals a couple months later. This was better than that, I thought, obviously. But you go back a little bit, we had Endgame, Infinity War. Around that time, we had Captain Marvel in early 2019. That's going back almost 3 years from when we're speaking right now. other than that, I don't really think we had many. I mean, Black Panther, I guess. Would you say this was probably the best from your memory that you can remember? The best origin story movie that we've gotten since Black Panther? And I guess even that would be kind of, I don't know if that's a cop-out answer because he was already in Civil War a couple of years earlier. I feel like it's been a couple of years since we got a really strong solo origin movie. I would classify this as that, but beyond Shang-Chi, though, I feel like it's been a while since we got a great origin story movie.
Yeah, I would say it's possibly the best. I'm a big fan of First Avenger, and I think like that's the only one I would say is close. But I don't know if I would consider Black Panther an origin movie. Like it's the first movie of his trilogy, but he's already an established character at that point.
Yeah, no, it's tough to say. I mean that, and then I'm trying to think what else was even out around that time. Maybe Spider-Man. I mean, same thing though. I mean, when they came out with Homecoming, he was already in, again, Civil War the year prior. So it's weird. I mean, I know they focused a lot on sequels going into Endgame and Infinity War for obvious reasons, but it's interesting looking back on it in retrospect. And I guess we're kind of getting that now with the shows. Again, we're getting Moon Knight in show form coming up. A lot of other different Marvel characters are getting their own shows and spin-offs and stuff like that, so it's interesting. But no, I thought this did a good job by and large of introducing the character. We'll go all over the place here, but Phil, do you think they did a good job with the post-credit scenes of kind of seamlessly incorporating him into the rest of the Avengers stuff? We got the appearance from Captain Marvel and Bruce Banner, Hulk, obviously, at the very end of the movie, as Bruce Banner, not as Hulk, of course, kind of paving the way for his involvement in future installments and films, whatever that might be. I'm not sure when the next team-up movie is going to be. But do you think they did a good job of having a kind of weaving his way into the Avengers stuff?
I think they did. I think they did enough here to build up his corner of the MCU, but also connect it to other things, whether that be having stuff like the ties to Iron Man 3, the very random Black Widow cameo in the Fight Club, and then, like you said, the post-credit scene. So I think they did a good job.
Kind of going off of that, I know we've spoken a lot about Iron Man 3 and in the many shows that we've done over the last year. Specifically, I think the last time we recorded, or maybe not the last time, but when we spoke with Liam on one of the Hawkeye reviews, and we spoke about Iron Man 3 being a Christmas movie, you had to have been happy, Phil, when Trevor Slattery showed up in this movie, kind of the callback to Iron Man 3, and we finally we haven't seen him. I know he was in that All Hail the King short many, many years ago, but that was quite a while ago, so you had to have been happy with his involvement in this movie.
Yeah, I was happy to see Trevor again. I thought it was really funny, and I felt vindicated because I've been saying for a long time, and I'm here to double down, the Mandarin is not a good character, guys. He is he is an Asian stereotype. He is a total play off of the Yellow Peril stuff from that time period. He's not a good character. Wenwu is a much better character in this movie. And it makes me happy that we didn't get like this very comic accurate Mandarin character, and we got something different.
Yeah, I think they did a great job with that and kind of explaining, how he wasn't the Mandarin or going by the name of the Mandarin or whatever, kind of, again, tying up those loose ends from Iron Man 3. What about you, Chris? Did you like how they kind of approached that and not retconning, but tying up those loose ends from Iron Man 3 with the whole Wenwu Mandarin stuff?
Oh, yeah. I mean, one of the highlights of this movie is Ben Kingsley's performance. He was amazing. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I love Iron Man 3, so I like that they kind of, I'm not going to say redeemed because I never felt that the character needed to be redeemed, but the fact that they actually followed up with this and closed that little loop was really nice. But yeah, I agree that Wenwu was an awesome character. The Mandarin in the comics is definitely just a big stereotype. I mean, it's basically Jackie Gleason in Breakfast at Tiffany's, it's over the top and it's offensive. And the fact that they found a lot of satisfying ways to get around all that stuff was nice. So I'm really curious to see where they go with the Ten Rings organization from here, since the sister's obviously taking over. We don't know what she's going to do with it. Is she going to be an outright villain? Is she going to try and use it for good? Who knows? But yeah, they've set up a couple of different interesting possibilities for a sequel. And yeah, I think I think that they did a good job with this one, also like tying it into the rest of the Marvel stuff without making it rely on it.
Mm-hmm.
Like some of these, some of these newer movies, it feels like it's just a chapter in another story, and this did feel like its own story, even though it is in that larger universe.
Yeah, I think a common complaint from some fans regarding the movies is that they kind of rely a little too heavily on the established characters. I know Iron Man's presence in the first Homecoming movie, some people didn't like that because they felt it was like an Iron Man 3.5 type of movie. It doesn't really bother me personally, but I can totally understand the argument. We didn't really get that here at all. Were there any established... I mean, I guess very briefly Wong for like one scene in the Fight Club thing, but... and also at the end in the post-credit scene. Beyond that, did we have any other established characters aside from Trevor Slattery, who's, I mean, established, but he's not like a big name at all in the grand scheme of the MCU? That was it,
else. Right? No. There was nobody else.
Yeah.
I mean, Abomination obviously had the quick cameo, but that was it.
Speaking of Abomination, were you disappointed that he was in there for all of 10 seconds? Because he was in the trailer, and a lot of people got excited thinking, holy shit, he might be, maybe not the big bad of the movie, obviously, but he might play a bigger role in this. I'm sure we are going to see him again in the She-Hulk show. I know that's been confirmed. Were you guys disappointed that he didn't have a bigger role in the movie, or was it just kind of a cool cameo?
That's all I expected was a cameo. I did not think he was going to be a major character at all.
What about you, Phil?
Yeah, I didn't expect him to be like a big main character. I expected it to be a nice little Easter egg. And I assume we probably might not have even seen that he was going to be the cameo if it didn't take so long to actually put the movie out because of COVID and stuff. It probably only made it into the trailer as a nice way to try and get people to watch the movie.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm surprised. That seems like one of those things where you would keep it a surprise and not announce it ahead of time in the trailer, but... like you said, I'm sure it got more people to go see it because, he hasn't been seen in the MCU since the first Hulk movie, however many years ago. It kind of going back a bit, talking about what you said, Chris, as far as where we go from here. This is probably the question to save for last, but you mentioned it, so I do want to discuss it. As far as a potential sequel, I don't think one's been announced. I know sometimes after these movies, after they do well, box office wise, they immediately announce, like, all right, we're going to do a second movie at some point. They haven't done that yet with this one. They haven't announced what the future holds as far as shows go. I know they've announced the whole slew of shows right after this movie came out for future characters and projects, either this year, next year, whatever. And nothing Shang-Chi related has been talked about at all. And I'm sure that doesn't mean that we're not getting it, but it's just not set in stone yet. To kind of go back to what you said, Chris, do you think a sequel is set in stone? We're definitely going to get a second one, or is it more likely we maybe have a show on Disney Plus talking about the sister's future as the head of the Ten Rings?
I mean, I could see them going the Disney Plus route, but I could definitely see a sequel too. Like, this was an early, like, post-pandemic theater thing where they weren't expecting this to be $1 billion movie. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't think they went into this hoping for that. But it actually did perform really well. And that's without being released in China. This movie wasn't released in China, which is crazy. So, and that's because of Chinese stuff, not because Marvel didn't want to. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a pretty safe bet we'll get a sequel at some point, whether it's just Shang-Chi 2 or it's some kind of two-hander movie. Like, I do think we're going to start seeing that more often. Like, like you said, the Spider-Man movie was a Spider-Man and Iron Man movie. Yeah. Like, I think we could see Shang-Chi and another hero teaming up for like a buddy story kind of thing.
Who do you think you would pair up best with? There's a lot of characters to choose from, but is there any one name that comes to mind as far as someone from a character standpoint that you think you would have good chemistry with?
I think they would have to go with somebody who is a little more grounded, like no powers, like a Daredevil type character. I'm not saying Daredevil, but like a character who might have some enhanced abilities, but isn't necessarily like super powered. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, we're not going to get Iron Fist, that's for sure. So I don't know what they're going to do.
You know, is that a guarantee that we're definitely not getting Iron Fist in the MCU, you think?
I mean, based on all those interviews with people being like, Finn Jones was lazy and blah, 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 like, I don't think Marvel would bring that actor back. They might use the character again, but they would probably just...
him.
Yeah, they could go, or they could just completely ignore the Netflix stuff and be like, listen, we gave you guys Daredevil and Kingpin, but, Iron Fist sucks, so we're going to do a new Iron Fist, and Danny Rand is going to be, like, East Asian instead of white with curly blonde hair.
Yeah, we also don't even know, going back to Hawkeye, if the Kingpin Daredevil stuff is carrying over from the show, if that was all canon, if it was, like, I don't think that was ever confirmed, right, in the last month or so?
No, the only thing I saw about it was D'Onofrio in an interview said he's playing the character as the same character. He's acting as if all the history is there. But Marvel is Marvel, so they may just go the route of, like, we're not going to say that happened, but we're not going to say it didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then that way they get to, like, kind of do their own thing, but also keep the people who loved that show happy, which I'm one of them. Like, I literally just finished season 3 the other day again. Like,
Wow.
I love that show, and I would love it if they did acknowledge it as canon, but if they don't, I won't be upset as long as they don't retcon all of it.
Yeah, it could be one of those things where they just kind of leave it up to the imagination of the viewer. I think that's kind of one of those Marvel things where they just don't really confirm or deny it, and because if they deny it, then people are going to be upset. So by not denying it, it's still technically a possibility, but they don't want to say yes. So I can understand that. What about you, Phil? What do you think the future holds for the franchise of Shang-Chi as far as another sequel, or a sequel rather, not another one, or a just a show and kind of doing the Ten Rings stuff and show format?
I mean, I think we're definitely getting a sequel at this point. It made way too much money, and there was a lot of positive buzz around it. So I think we're definitely getting a sequel.
Yeah, I guess it's just more a matter of when than if. I guess it's more a matter of just when they can fit it into the schedule, which is possible. I mean, they come out with their long list of movies that they're doing for the next 10 years, and they can always incorporate stuff along the way. Like, I find it hard to believe in the next 2 or 3 years we're not going to get like an X-Men movie or a Fantastic Four, which they obviously haven't officially announced yet, but they could always slide into the schedule whenever they want. On a side note, too, not really having to do with that, but in talking about the characters from the movie, obviously is not a secondary role, but one of the main people from the movie. Phil, I'll start with you. How do you think Aquafina did in her role as kind of like the second bit player to Shang-Chi and how she did? Because it was, I don't want to say it was a polarizing choice to put her in the movie, but she's been more known for like comedy and stuff like that. I've only ever actually seen her in Jumanji, the second Jumanji movie that came out a few years ago, and I liked her in that, but I haven't really seen her in much else. I know she's done shows and stuff like that. How do you think she did, and was she a good quality addition to the cast?
I think she worked as a comedic foil for Shang-Chi here. Her her style of comedy isn't really my cup of tea, but I think it worked for what it was. I'm glad they didn't try and shoehorn a love interest in.
I agree.
And they didn't try and make this like a friendship turned into like a romance thing. But I thought it was good for what it was. I thought the story that they told of her being a very westernized Asian and going back home and trying to, and tying it back to, her family in America was a good story to tell.
Yeah, it seemed like they were going in the direction of making them a couple. At least it seemed that way to me at one point, at least early on in the movie when they were with his family, or her family rather, and he was there, and I think the grandmother had made a comment to the effect of like, oh, like, when's your boyfriend coming over or whatever, and she was like, no, we're just friends. So usually they do that stuff for a reason. I mean, obviously it was just done to establish that they're not together, but sometimes they throw that stuff in there as a point in where it's like, all right, we're going to say that, but we're going to go back to it and make them a couple by the end of the movie, which very well could still be the case because they clearly care more about each other and their friendship at the end of the movie than they did from the beginning. So I honestly don't really want to see that personally. I just don't think it's necessary. But what about you, Chris, as far as her role in the movie, how you think Aquafina did, and kind of going off what Phil said about not going the predictable route and making them a couple?
I did like that. I really liked that she didn't go as overboard as she has in some things. Like, she was funny without being distracting, if that makes sense. Like, some of her past roles, it's like big joke, big joke, big joke. Like, it's all just punchlines with her. And in this, it felt like she actually got to do a little bit of actual acting, especially in the second half, because once Ben Kingsley was there, they took some of the comedic stuff off her and let her have an actual story and growth. So yeah, I hope she sticks around, and it feels like she probably will, because at the end of this movie, Wong obviously is like, I want both of you to come. So clearly, I think she'll almost be like his unofficial sidekick, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Just kind of going along for the ride. One of the things I had seen people really want out of this movie going into it, maybe not want, but more so expect, or maybe want to see, maybe not necessarily disappointed that it didn't happen, but do some sort of like a fighting tournament having to do with the 10 rings or something like that. We didn't get that necessarily. We got that one Fight Club scene that was like, again, like a couple minute long scene. And we did get a lot of great action scenes, though. So, from an action standpoint, going back to what you said earlier, Chris, about growing up on those kung fu type movies, like, you know, Bruce Lee type stuff, do you think this movie kind of lived up to that and captured that feel? Like, I love the bus scene, for example. That was one of my favorite scenes from the entire movie. The dual flip guy from Spider-Man making a cameo, filming it, was probably the best part about it. Do you think this movie captured that feel of the old kung fu stuff, and as far as the action scenes go, anyway?
The action choreography was still very Marvel. It was kung fu, but it was still very Marvel-y. It didn't feel like they brought in Yen Wu Ping, you know, the guy who did The Matrix and all these other big movies, but they did go to the effort of making each shot a little longer than usual, which is like part of the fun of those kung fu movies is there's these long uninterrupted sequences of complicated moves. And too often the Marvel movies, and let's face it, all modern action movies, it's punch, cut, throw, punch, cut. Like, you don't see very much, and the camera's cutting. It's like WWE Raw sometimes. It's the camera's cutting left and right and center. And this movie, you actually get to see little sequences here and there that show that these people actually put the effort into learning this choreography and doing a good job. And when you have somebody like Michelle Yeoh, you're obviously going to take advantage of the skills she's built up over decades of being the foremost female martial artist actor in the world.
You know, it's interesting you say that. I remember someone had said when we talked with Tom about this back in September about the camera cuts and the Kevin Dunn-esque type stuff with the camera cuts during the fight scenes. It didn't really stand out to me until it was you, Chris, that had mentioned that. And, you know, bringing it back here again. And it definitely did stand out as far as something. It didn't bother me, but it was definitely noticeable. It's something they can kind of cut down on. What about you, Phil? How did you think the fight scenes came across? Do you feel the same way as Chris, or did you like him a little bit more, or how did you feel about it?
I thought the fight scenes were handled really well. I thought the choreography was really good. The thing that I really enjoyed about the bus scene, for example, is they were clearly taking cues from Jackie Chan movies. Like it was just some of the beats in that fight scene were obviously based off of Jackie Chan movies. And I liked a lot of influences they used for the movie. I do think in the second half of the movie, it kind of got more into formulaic Marvel third act fight scenes where there had to be a whole bunch of henchmen to fight and there had to be a whole bunch of colorful weapons. It kind of felt like the end of the third act of Black Panther in some ways. But I still think that fight with Wenwu is really good. Like the main fight with Wenwu is very good.
Yeah, with the whole dragon stuff happening, I mean, there was a lot going on in that one scene, but I thought overall it did come across pretty well in the whole father connection type thing with him making the turn, so to speak, at the end. How did you feel about that final fight scene, Chris? Did it kind of tie everything together nicely, or was it, again, something, like Phil said, it kind of had that Marvel vibe to it and not in technically a positive way?
Yeah, everybody had color-coded weapons, so you know who to cheer for and who to boo. You know, it is what it is, but it was fun. They did a good job bouncing between like the two armies fighting and then the dragon monsters fighting and then Shang-Chi and his dad, and you know, it had a lot of different things to juggle and did it well. But Phil's right, the Wenwu versus Shang-Chi stuff was the biggest strength of those scenes. And I think a lot of that just goes to Tony Leung being just such a legend. Like, that guy is a legitimately fantastic actor. He can do all the action stuff still. And they really got lucky casting him, because he is one of those guys who's like, he's a legend over in China. You know, he's the man. So I really liked the way that final fight scene was kind of storyboarded, I guess would be the right way to say it, because it never spent too much time on one part of the fight without showing us what else was going on, but it also didn't feel like they were jumping back and forth too quickly.
Yeah, too frantic. Yeah. No, I agree. I think they did a nice job of kind of capping it off with the final fight scene. I kind of agree with both of your sentiments there. As far as just the movie overall, again, of the three of us, Phil, you had just rewatched it earlier today from when we're recording. What's like, I'll start with you then. So what's the rewatch on this? I think it was such a great movie to the point where it's definitely worth rewatching. And we got a lot of Marvel stuff in 2021. As far as the shows, we got 4 movies in the span of 5 months, which is kind of crazy. Is this a movie for people that haven't seen it yet? And if you have Disney Plus and you're watching the other Marvel stuff, why wouldn't you just watch it? They put it up 2 months after the movie came out. But what's the rewatch on this? Is it worth going back and seeing if you haven't seen it or haven't seen it in a while? Or is it one of those movies where it's like you kind of know what's going to happen and you know enough of it from us just talking about it right now and it's not worth rewatching? Where do you fall?
I think it's definitely worth a rewatch. I definitely enjoyed it more and in the movie just because of the experience of seeing it on a big screen. But I think it's definitely worth the rewatch. I think a lot of the story arcs aged really well. I think most of the intimate fight scenes aged very well. Like watching it the second time, I think the bus fight is even better than the first time I saw it. I even forgot how good the fight scene is when they're trying to escape the fight club and all of the henchmen come in.
Yeah.
That was really good, yeah. When they were kind of like going up and down the bamboo scaffolding, that was a lot of fun. And that's another thing that felt very Jackie Chan to me. I've like literally seen him fighting on bamboo scaffolding in movies.
Yeah, no, the influence was definitely noticeable. Chris, what about you as far as the rewatch, factor goes here? Is it worth rewatching for those that haven't seen it at all, or for those of us like myself and yourself, as far as we haven't seen it in 4 or 5 months? What's the rewatch factor on this movie?
Well, I have rewatched it since it went up on Disney Plus, like that first day, but then it's like not since then. But I will say this movie is rewatchable just because it's a fun, easy movie to get through. I don't think it's necessarily required viewing yet. That doesn't mean that something in this movie won't come back to play a bigger role, but as of right now, it does feel sort of sectioned off. So I'm curious to see how any of these characters or the 10 rings are used, because they set up something at the end being like the 10 rings are calling to something.
Yeah, so, that was confusing to me, yeah.
Yeah, we don't know what that is yet, and like this is a character that I'm not super familiar with, so I don't know what that might be. Like, I don't know if that's something from the comics, Phil, where like, is there some alien entity that's coming and looking for these rings, or I don't know.
Well, I know in the comics, Mandarin's rings are tied to Fin Fang Foom. So I don't know. I don't imagine that that's going to be the big bad. I mean, it could be. It seems like this is a good way to use him as a beacon for something new. I mean, they've already introduced Celestials. I mean, it could be Galactus. It could be something else. It could be Annihilus. I don't know.
Yeah,
I did hear one interesting thing. I'm not sure if this was ever confirmed by the filmmakers, but I think the guy Simu Liu actually commented on this, that the reason the rings are bracelets in this and not actual ring rings is because they're rings that are made to fit a dragon. So I'm almost wondering if this is going to go the route of the Eternals and Thor and basically say, like, yes, dragons are real, but they're aliens. Because all of our ancient history and these gods and stuff, Marvel writes them as aliens.
Well, I mean, Fin Fang Foom is a dragon, and he's an alien.
So he is, okay. Yeah, so I think maybe that we're going to start to see... I mean, that would be awesome to just see, like, a dragon flying through space.
That's crazy. Does that get to, like, F9 levels of driving a car in space, or is it within Marvel it's okay?
I mean, look at what we've seen in Marvel. We literally saw... Like, they went full on for the Celestials, like a bigger than a planet dude. I mean, nothing is off limits now.
I guess so, yeah. We'll get to Eternals next week, but let's not forget that in all these shows, technically No Way Home and Hawkeye as well, that those take place, I believe, after Eternals. So in all of those movies, not that we necessarily see it, there is a giant head somewhere in the earth, unless they got rid of it or something. I think that's canon now, right? That's just we'll talk about that in our Eternals review, but that's just there, right? It's kind of bursting through the atmosphere or whatever.
Yeah, and I have a theory about that. There is an Avengers headquarters in the comics that's in the body of an Eternal.
Oh,
like,
wow.
It's a dead Eternal, and they use different parts of its body for different things. Like, the brain is actually used as, like, a supercomputer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Tony and Doctor Strange each have one of its eyes as their private quarters.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I could see either part of that thing getting moved or the whole thing just being used as an Avengers facility at some point.
Well, at this current point, we don't have an Avengers headquarters anymore, right? After Endgame, and I know Hawkeye had mentioned it to Kate about like, oh, yeah, no, he sold that years ago, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, that's probably a possibility, right?
Yeah, I mean, they sold the building in New York, and the facility in upstate New York got destroyed.
Yeah,
so, unless they have some other SHIELD facility set up, like, I mean, Nick Fury's got SHIELD facilities all over the place. He was on some big ass satellite in space, so maybe the Avengers will just get like a space base at some point.
Yeah, I mean, possibilities are endless. I didn't really think about that. I haven't heard that theory, but definitely one that could come to fruition, because they're making enough mentions of the fact there is no Avengers headquarters, and that's something that they want to move forward with. That's absolutely an option. But we'll talk about Eternals next week here. That one I'm not as excited to be rewatching, but I got to. I mean, it's been shorter since I've seen that one, but honestly, a lot of that movie was just a blur. Not that it was bad at all, but I got to go back and rewatch and try to remember all the love stuff that's going on, all the love triangles and everything else. So we'll get to that one next week.
So many characters, and it's so long.
Yeah, that one is more of a chore to watch. More than this one. Honestly, spoiler alert, but that was easily my least favorite Marvel entity. Not even movie, but anything that they did in 2021. I loved a lot of the shows, pretty much all of the shows. Some were stronger than others. The movies, I feel, were not remotely on the same level. I think No Way Home blew everything else away. Shang-Chi was great. And then, Black Widow was pretty good. And then Eternals, I think, was at a distant fourth. But I've seen other varying opinions, so I guess it kind of depends on who you talk to. But again, we'll talk about that one next week. In the meantime, though, I got to figure out a fucking name for this show. I feel like we've been going on for you and I, Chris, have been doing this for almost 2 years, and I still don't know a name to properly, promote this podcast. I don't know what it would be called. We cover Star Wars stuff as well, but I got to get on.
I think when you were uploading it on Mondays, weren't you just calling it like the Marvel Movie Monday podcast or something? But like, there's no schedule anymore.
Exactly. There's no schedule in some of these shows, like, a lot of these shows on Disney Plus now, because that was when we were doing the movies. Since we talk about the shows, I'll put it up on Fridays so it's closer to when the show comes out. Like Peacemaker comes out on Thursday, shit like that. But yeah, since we're not just talking about the movies, I can't call it the Marvel Movie Podcast anymore on Mondays. So I got to figure something out. Maybe I'll put out a tweet or something and we can come up with something. I mean, I'm sure every name under the sun has been taken already, but I got to figure something out, because I got to call this show something, because we don't talk about just one thing. Like, now we're talking about the movies, and like I told you, in a couple of weeks, we're doing Eternals and then No Way Home gradually, not every day, but once a week. And then we'll get into our overall thoughts on Book of Boba Fett, and then Peacemaker will have wrapped up around then, and then we got a little while before Moon Knight. But we talk about so many different things here between DC, Marvel, and Star Wars that it can't be just something Marvel-themed. I don't know. I got to think about it. I honestly have no idea. I'm not good at that type of stuff, but hopefully next time we'll have a name. But in the meantime, people can follow you guys, Chris, on the Twitter machine at BR_Doctor. Phil, you're on Twitter at PhilDL616. This has been great, guys. Thanks for the time, and I look forward to catching up with you guys next week to talk all about Eternals.
Thanks.